Hi, I want to show off a Unity asset called Polity Manager. This is all documented in the README, but if you don't like to read, this video is basically going to cover the same thing. So what is Polity Manager? In short, it's an editor tool that lets you set up different political groups and their relation to one another. If you have a bunch of NPCs and you want them to be organized into groups that can interact with each other differently based on their relationship, this asset should help you with that. Now, the first thing to do is to make a polity, which should represent the largest and most encompassing political unit in your game. Say, for example, you're building a historical strategy game, so you could make a polity called Empire, then maybe Shogunate. But if you're just making a small team-based game, you could just refer to a polity as Red Team and Blue Team. It's very flexible, you just need to classify what a polity is in your context. You should notice that each polity has a classes array. This basically signifies a smaller branch or class that exists inside this polity. It could represent a government branch or a large organization that serves the polity. So, for example, an empire could have a patrician, plebeian, and legion class. Each class then has a list of factions, which represents the smallest political unit inside a polity, and is within or supervised by the class that contains it. The patrician class could have a proconsul, consul, and legate faction, since these factions are created from patricians. But the plebeian class can't be proconsuls, consuls, or legates, so instead they'll be farmers or craftsmen. Once you define all the polities and its classes and factions, you can scroll down to the bottom of the component and you'll see that a matrix was created. This is referred to as the Polity Relation Matrix, and you can use it to see relation types between every polity in your game. I could set this cell to red, and this would indicate that these two polities are now enemies. Now let's create a game object to assign all these polities to. I got a cube right here, and all I have to do is add the PolityMember class to it. Great, it looks like all the polities we made in the Polity Manager is shown in this Polities dropdown. Now we did create some classes for this polity, so why is it showing up as a blank dropdown? Because the polity member is not required to be in a class or faction, but it does need to belong to a polity. A blank dropdown simply means that this polity member does not belong to a class, but if I click on it, you can see all the classes for this polity. And if I choose the patrician class, another dropdown appears for me to choose a faction associated with that class. Another thing to note is when you select a class without any factions in it, like the Legion class that we made before, no faction dropdown appears, since there's no factions within this class. That's pretty much the meat and bone of Polity Manager. You create a polity in the Polity Manager, then assign that polity to a polity member. There's a bunch of public methods which are all documented for you to use and handle interactions between different members. We'll skip ahead to the demo scene where I have a bunch of polity member prefabs set up. Besides political affiliation, a polity member could also be associated with a certain family or have interpersonal relationships with other polity members, and this relation would be separate from their political ones. This is done by opening up the Polity Member Graph under the Polity Relation Matrix, which will present you with a single root node. The Polity Member Graph displays the immediate family members of the root node, which means its parents, any partners it has, and any children that it has with those partners. Let's assign some parents to this polity member. Notice that once I assign 2 parents to the root node, I can't assign any more. You can have 1 parent for a node, but no more than 2. However, I can assign as many partners as I want to this node. Similarly, I could create a child, then click on the parent button on it, and attach to a partner node. And this indicates that this child is a child of the root node and its partner. Now let's see these polities in action. Play the demo scene and you see a bunch of dummies which have spawned. If you hover your mouse over them, you can see their political data along with the family data. Some polities show an image because I assigned an emblem to it. Let's open the Polity Manager and find the relationship between red team and blue team. Currently it is yellow, which represents a neutral relationship. However, if I right click on this cell, these polities become enemies and the onRelation change event is invoked, notifying all subscribers to react accordingly. In this case, the NPCs of these polities react by targeting each other. We will now introduce an ally for blue team. If I left click on a cell for the relation between the orcs and the blue team, it will turn green, indicating that these 2 polities are now allies. Since the orcs are now allied to the blue team, that means it will now target enemies of blue team, in this case red team, which you can see. If I then change the relationship between the orcs and blue team to enemies, then it will begin targeting blue team instead. And if I no longer want the orcs to be involved in the conflict between red team and blue team, I could set its relation to blue team back to neutral, and it will return to its spawn point. I will finally end the conflict between red team and blue team by setting the relation back to neutral as well, and they too will return to their spawn point. This ends the demo for Polity Manager. Hopefully, you could find it useful in setting up complex political faction systems for your game. Thanks for watching.